Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump meeting with his National Security Council next hour as he considers possible U.S. involvement. Here is what he had to say and many appearances that he had at the White House. Here's one of them. Watch.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Peter Doocy, live from the White House. Dana?
Thank you, Bill. Peter?
Got it. Hey, Peter.
Dana, Bill, we can report here from the White House that because all options remain on the table, something President Trump has been asking his military advisors about is whether or not bunker buster bombs could get the job done and penetrate deep enough to destroy certain hidden Iranian nuclear infrastructure, if that is what President Trump decides to do. He is also out in the open hinting at other kinds of military assistance the U.S. could offer.
We have planes that are undetectable, flying around like, nobody's able to see them stealth. Israel has incredible weaponry, so we'll see what happens. I've been asked about it by everybody, but I haven't made a decision.
With each successful Israeli strike inside Iran, the Iranians have less leverage to negotiate. They've also shown no willingness yet to abandon their nuclear weapons program, and Iranian offers to send negotiators to the White House for talks next week are probably impossible because the negotiators are holed up and can't just go to the airport in Tehran to fly to D.C.
Yeah, I mean, they asked if they could come. We'll see if that happens. It's not that easy for them to come. They can't get out. They're in Iran, and in one case, the guy wanted to come so badly, but he can't get out because there's bombs dropping all over the place.
We are about 90 minutes away from President Trump's latest intelligence briefing. That's going to be in the Situation Room on the lower level of the West Wing, away from cameras. Dana?
All right, Peter Doocy, thank you so much. For more on this is Bari Weiss. She's the editor of The Free Press, and it's an honor to have you today. I know you're at The Free Press doing a ton of work, and we're following it all. Here's a billboard that is up in Tel Aviv right now. It's asking, Mr. President, please finish the job. That's in Tel Aviv. In America, this polling from Fox News out last night I thought was pretty stunning, and it's probably changed even in the last few days. This is from June 13th to 16th. We're right now on the 19th today. 78% of Americans saying that they are concerned about Iran getting a nuclear bomb. That's way up. It was 66% in April of 2025. So people have shifted their opinion.
Well, I think that they're hearing very, very clearly a message from the American president saying Iran cannot get a nuclear bomb no matter what. And they're also hearing him and many people in his administration making the case that a nuclear Iran is not just an existential threat to Israel, it is an existential threat to America. This is a regime that has not just been declaring death to Israel since it came to power in 1979. It is a regime that has been declaring death to America. And I think, guys, one of the key lessons that Israel and perhaps the world has learned since the massacre of October 7th is to take these enemies not just figuratively, not just seriously, but literally. When they say they want a second genocide, they want a nuclear holocaust, they mean it. So it's not simply that Israel has to fear the existential threat of a nuclear Iran. Think about what the world would look like if this regime had nuclear weapons, not just its ability to target Israel, Europe, and ultimately America, but the nuclear arms race it would set off in the Middle East. Israel has opened up a profound opportunity for total realignment in the region. And I think what the president is seeing is that Israel has pulled off something that is astonishing and will be studied by historians. We're only beginning to understand the extent of what their intelligence has been able to pull off. The idea that Mossad operatives set up a drone factory inside hostile Iranian terror. I mean, it's unbelievable. So now the question is, we know that Trump has sort of greenlit the possibility of a strike on Fordo, and now, and I think with every passing day, we're seeing that the leverage, that what that clip just showed is that the president's leverage and Israel's leverage just gets stronger and stronger by the day with every Israeli strike.
So Iran's on an island. Dan Hoffman the other day said the IDF has that country wired, and I think he's right about that. In the past, the Iranians would reach out to their proxies, but the proxies have been mute. Here we go, Wall Street Journal. For decades, Iran's leaders built up a network of allied militias in the Middle East that shared a hatred of Israel and America to gain regional influence and protect the regime. But as the theocracy is now fighting for its own survival, its allies are missing in action. That's true for Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's true for Hamas in either the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. It's true for Yemen and the Houthis. We just had an expert on who said the Iranians' best play should be to retreat to Oman and start talking to save their own lives and their regime. What is Iran's best play, do you think?
Well, I mean, the best play is Trump has laid it out. I want total surrender. Either surrender will come with the bombing or the destruction of Fordo, whether that's military commandos on the part of Israel or bombing from America, we don't yet know, or surrender. But he's saying ceasefire isn't enough, I want total surrender. The problem is one of the things that we have learned about the way this regime functions is that you can't trust anything they say. So they might very well go to Oman and say, total surrender, come and under American supervision or IAEA supervision, we will destroy Fordo. But where are we going to be 10 years from now? Where are we going to be 15 years from now as they, raise up a new generation of nuclear scientists and create new, facilities that are capable of doing this? What does this regime have, guys, if not for this ability?
Right.
What is it?
That's their leverage.
That's their leverage. That's the whole game for them. Khamenei is 86 years old. He is, do we really think that he's going to give this up? I mean, I think that's the question hanging over everything right now.
One thing I've been wanting to ask somebody like you is, if you think back to when President Trump took the action, and it was bold, to take out Soleimani, because a terrible actor evil person from Iran who had gone after Americans, had American blood on his hands, and Iran did nothing in response, at least nothing spectacular. Obviously, they continued to fight against Israel. They continued to hurt Americans wherever they could find them, but it wasn't like a big spectacular response. Do you get the sense, or based on all of your reporting, that how Israel has been able to degrade the capabilities inside Iran means that they're kind of on their last legs right now? Or do you think that they still have some in reserve with these missile barrages like the one that we saw at the hospital today?
I don't think anyone can say.
Okay.
Are they going to walk with a suitcase and a dirty bomb? Possible. I mean, we've seen what their proxies can do with hand gliders, bicycles, and, on foot coming over the border into Israel. So I would never sit here, and I don't think anyone should ever sit here and underestimate the conniving capabilities of a regime that has genocidal intentions. Am I shocked, as anyone is, by what Israel has managed to do over the past, I've lost track of time, is it 6 days?
7.
Of course I am. Guys, they managed to infiltrate with Mossad agents. They managed to, I'm sure you guys saw this, hack the official regime television station, showing women showing their hair, cutting off their hair, with a little symbol in the corner of a roaring lion, which of course is the name of this operation, Operation Rising Lion. So I'm astonished by what Israel has managed to pull off. I think the president is blown away by what Israel has managed to pull off. But, it's Iran. And it has proxies all over the region, and we just don't know.
I think also the partisan lines seem to be dissolving, and we just pointed out the polling here in the United States. Democratic Senator John Fetterman is echoing that. He was with us 2 days ago and said this to reporters just yesterday. Okay, so what he's talking about here are the numbers and what they tell us right now about the American people. Roll this.
And also, I'd like to point out, the polling has shown that I think it's about effectively 80% of Americans thinks that Iran should never acquire a nuclear weapon. So, this isn't shocking. It's this is not warmongering. This is peacemongering. It's Iran can't ever allow a nuclear facility and a bomb. And so this is where we're at. I mean, that's not controversial. It definitely should be controversial for Democrats.
So you're President Trump, and you're looking at these numbers. This might be the only, and maybe even the last issue that he will find a sense of unity while he's president.
Yeah, I think that there is the polling, not just that Fox poll, but a tremendous amount of polling is showing that Americans, commonsensical Americans, feel a few ways. One, they do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They are extraordinarily concerned about that. They also, and I think this is the majority position as well, don't want American soldiers and boots on the ground in another Middle Eastern war. The beauty of this situation is that's not necessary. You know, at the worst case scenario in terms of American involvement is the use of these B-2 bombers and the dropping of a few of these MOPs. That is what the Israelis have said. We have a piece out today by Neil Ferguson and Yoav Galan making that argument. And so I think one of the clarifying aspects in terms of domestic politics of this moment is that you have a fringe of people on the right and the left, Thomas Massie, AOC, Tucker Carlson, and then you have the vast majority of the American people who have, in my view, an extraordinarily commonsensical and wise position on this issue, which is that, of course, they're concerned about a nuclear Iran. Of course, they're concerned about a nuclear arms race taking place in the Middle East. And by the way, it's not just the Israelis that are saying Iran was on the cusp of getting nuclear weapons. It was CENTCOM saying that Israel was within weeks, if they decided to sprint toward a nuclear weapon, of having enough material for 8 or 9 bombs.
Right.
So that's how close we are.
It appears the Israelis are in control of this matter. I'm not saying they've won the war, but it appears they're in control. As long as that's the case, Trump should be in no hurry. You've got a country of 90 million people, and if you cut off the head of the snake in that country, you don't know what happens. Things can go sideways, and you know they're considering that inside the Situation Room now, as well as in Tel Aviv. Last thought, real quick.
No, that Donald Trump has said, and is continuing to say, I'm going to make a decision in my own time.
Yeah.
And he's watching as Israel unbelievably and capably is doing more than decimating a regime that threatens not just Israel, but America and the free world.
Well, it is true that a week ago, I don't know if anybody would be able to predict what we have seen. Bari, thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys so much.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.